Penguin Random House Audio presents Chrysalis, a thriller by Lincoln Child. Read for you by Johnathan Mcclain. Technology is a useful servant, but a dangerous master. Christian Luce Lunga. Chapter 1. Randall Pike crouched in his tent, disassembling his surveying gear, transit theodolite and retro reflector, and thrusting the delicate equipment into foam-fitted cases. He'd spent almost every waking minute of the last 2 weeks with them, knew every plummet and reticle as well as if it was family. But here he was, manhandling everything. "Randy," the feminine voice floated in from outside. "The chopper will be here in 5 minutes. "I know," he called back, louder than necessary. Then, modulating his voice, "I'll be ready." He should have expected this. He was annoyed. As always, on the last day of each annual pilgrimage to the Kalamazoo Glacier, he rolled up his North Face bag with practiced twists, then stuffed it into its sack and pulled the lanyard tight. He glanced around. Backpack, scientific gear, laptop, notebook, toilet kit. Everything was ready. The ice core equipment was lashed together. All that remained was to break down the tent, and he could do that in 60 seconds. He pushed all the gear out ahead of him, then ducked through into the open air. Even though he'd been inside the tent only a quarter of an hour, the dazzling glare of the glacier temporarily blinded him. As the glare faded, he could make out his lone companion, Wing Cow Pei, standing outside her own setup 30 yards away. Her gear, of course, was already stowed in a neat pile, with just a few items sitting off to one side. 5 minutes. He took a deep breath of the frigid air and slowly turned, boots crunching in the hard, packed snow, to take one final look around before they departed. As always, the rugged beauty of the place, so majestic in its solitude, was overwhelming. His annoyance drained away, replaced by awe. To the north, the peaks of the Alaska Range glittered like diamonds in the Arctic sun, Denali rising like a king among princes. The white blanket of glacier ran away from it, the smooth surface becoming rougher as it approached the accumulation zone. There was no sound save for a faint whisper of wind. The closest human habitation was 40 miles away, the closest city an hour by chopper, Anchorage. In an hour he'd be there, and then, 24 hours later, back in New England. "Want me to take a picture?" Wing asked as she checked her gear. "You know how lousy you are with selfies." "No. Thanks, though." It was a thoughtful gesture, but a photo was the last thing he wanted. He had little interest in remembering how this place looked today, because he knew when he returned next year, the view would have changed, and not for the better. In the decade he'd been coming to this spot, the Kalamazoo had shrunk in dramatic fashion. The ablation zone around his drill site contracting 14 inches in the last 12 months alone. Over 10 years, its surface had fallen a total of 6 linear feet. The glacier was aging prematurely, advancing with the speed of some frantic silent comedy. Every day, icebergs the size of skyscrapers were calving into the ocean as their terminus grew increasingly unstable. As the snowpack receded, curiosities now and then had begun appearing out of the ice. Ancient seeds, nuts buried for countless millennia, seeing sun again well before their intended time. This, ironically, was a benefit of the receding glacier, the natural ancient treasures buried within it. 2 years back, a woolly mammoth had emerged from the Siberian melt. That, along with the more recent find that accounted for Wing's presence this year. The ground he stood on had once been jungle. Eventually, that jungle, too, would once again emerge into the sun. Pike smiled mirthlessly. By then, of course, global warming would have raised the sea level 60 feet. And mankind would have other things on its mind besides geologic research. This was the first year he'd actually felt the glacier moving. As he lay in bed at night, tapping readings and measurements into his tablet, he could feel the Kalamazoo groaning beneath him like a living thing. Since they'd arrived, a large crevasse, 50 feet long, its knife-edged depths unguessable, had opened with a shattering crack, just yards from Wing's tent. Pike had quickly offered to help move her to a safer location, but she'd refused with the same quiet, philosophical manner in which she seemed to approach everything. She hadn't explained, but he thought he understood anyway. Wing believed one's fate had long ago been determined, and there was nothing we could do to change it. He glanced again at Wing. He really hadn't gotten to know her well over the last 2 weeks. She'd been busy cataloging and running tests on the ice cores he'd brought up, but she had proved a decent companion. She seemed to share his grief at how the Kalamazoo Glacier was dying around them, although it was clear she was more interested in his discovery the previous year, and in his theories about it. He'd probably talked more about those than he should. After all, she was practically management. But it was lonely up here, and Wing was a good listener. Besides, at the end of the day, they were both on the same team. He walked toward her, heaving a sigh as he navigated around the crevasse. This annoyance bubbled up every time he left the glacier. Within a week or two, he'd forget all about it as he busied himself with sample data. If he was honest, it had become a kind of hypocritical gesture, easing his guilt about not feeling enough guilt. Because the discoveries made possible by this retreating glacier were now a primary focus. Measuring melt and shrinkage was almost passé. And those discoveries had proved more promising than he'd ever hoped. There it was. Something that would make him feel better. He pulled his tablet out of a pocket of his parka, connected it to the sat phone, and sent a brief message. It was Carewell protocol to maintain radio silence during an expedition. One never knew what academic competitor might find a way to listen in. But the expedition was done now, and he could at least send a thumbs up to the complex without going into detail. Wing was stuffing the last few of her items into a canvas carry-all. "Listen," he began as he walked toward her. "I just wanted to thank you." Then he frowned. "Are those core samples?" She turned suddenly, fingers rising to stroke a small mole situated in the perfect center of her throat. It was an unconscious gesture he'd seen before. Clearly she hadn't heard him approach over the soft snow. "Yep," she said after a brief pause. She put the last of half a dozen frosted tubes into the carry-all, then zipped it up briskly and stowed it with the rest of her gear. Odd that he hadn't seen her with them before. "I didn't realize your work involved taking full cores too," he said. "I assumed it was minimally invasive." "That just shows how unobservant you are," Wing said with a giggle. "You're always so busy fussing over your equipment. It's like you've been wrapped in your own private world the last 2 weeks. Pike shook his head ruefully. "You're right. I suppose I've been a terrible companion." Wing waved this away, leaning on an ice axe for support. Then she cocked her head, listening. Pike could hear it too. The drone of a chopper, distant but growing closer. "Look at you," she said with mock reproach. "Our ticket out of here is arriving, and you're on your tablet instead of packing away your tent. Come on, I'll give you a hand." And she began making her way over to Pike's tent. Pike, embarrassed, hurried to get ahead of her. "Did you send back a report?" she asked, prematurely. "Just to pass on the good news." The helicopter was still a few minutes away. That would give them time to— "Naughty boy," Wing said from behind him. Suddenly, he heard a grunt of effort.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?